Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back once again to the Evan Here's Culture campaign. It's the long-awaited, maybe by somebody, bonus episode that happens every 20 episodes of the show where we do an album that is well regarded, I suppose, that does not make an appearance on Pitchfork's Top 200 Albums of the 2010s list. So today we're welcoming back an incredible guest, Tuckerman Wunderle. Tuckerman, how are you?
I'm doing very well. It's a pleasure to be back. I thank you for having me back on.
We're talking a 2018 album called Little Dark Age by
MGMT.
Tuck. How did you become familiar with MGMT, and what is it about this album that gets you so excited?
All right. Well, two wonderful questions as always to start out. I was a longtime MGMT fan, kind of before this album came onto the scene. Listened to them a lot in the early 2010s. I had a radio show on Wool FM here in southern Vermont that I did for a while, and MGMT was a staple on my show just because I like their music and stuff. And you know, it was a good kind of breach between the Gorillaz and Passion Pit. You know, you could kind of use it to bridge in between, and they got a lot of good songs. You know, the first time I think I ever really heard an MGMT song was on a Xbox 360 game called Shaun White Snowboarding. Yeah, the Shaun White snowboarding video game. Phenomenal soundtrack. The song Time to Pretend by MGMT was on that game. Listened to it a lot, cruising down the slopes on my snowboard, and you know, the love kind of ballooned from there. So that's where I.
Shaun White. Yeah, I Time to Pretend. Speaking of video games, it also appears on Guitar Hero Live.
Really?
Which is how I was first made to. That's my first MGMT experience was in the Spider-Man Homecoming trailer when. From what I understand, people didn't like that middle period between the beginning and My Little Dark Age. So this time you're saying of you playing it on the radio in the early 2010s, were you still on board with what they were putting out at the time?
You know, and that's part of what I wanted to touch on in this episode is they definitely had a little bit of a lackadaisical period. And I see a little bit of that in kind of an autobiographical sense in this album. You know, the Little Dark Age could be, you know, understood as that region between their album Congratulations, which I believe is 2010, which I really like. Some people are a little iffy on it. I really like it. And this 2018, almost, you know, a full decade later, like that's a span for an established band to not come out with anything, you know, commercially very successful, because there wasn't too much in that period. So
there was their third self-titled album. And then they disappeared that was in like 2013, and then they disappeared for 5 years.
Yeah, when this album came out, you know,
you were already in. You were already ride or die, or ride or be wounded. Would you say is more?
Yeah. I don't think MGMT could ever kill me, but ride or be wounded is a good
yeah. So you were on board. They come
out, and I really enjoyed it. I was like, wow, because it sounds like classic MGMT. They didn't lose kind of the old style. You know, they're staying true to their roots, but they're experimenting a little more. There's a little bit more of like the kind of 80s power pop ballad you can hear a little bit throughout the album. It's a little more grandiose, I would say, than some of their other stuff. And, you know, I think they were experimenting a little more. The vocals were mixed a little differently. And I was like, this is nice, you know, a band chills for a while and then comes out with something that sounds like them, but sounds like them 8 years later. You know, they improve their style. I was very curious to hear what you thought, because I don't think you'd listened to it until recently.
No, I had not listened to it. I mean, I the one song that I was kind of familiar from it was just, if I remember correctly, sometimes when we were living together in the dorm, just walking around, you would say to yourself, you know, me and Michael. So I was familiar with the phrase "me and Michael" from that one song, but I hadn't heard it. And immediately the first song kicks in. She works out too much.
Works out too much.
And I was like, okay, I'm gonna have fun with this.
Absolutely,
and
it's a fun album.
Yeah, and that was how I felt the all way through. Is like, the whole way through, all the way through. I'm like, I am having fun with this. I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't see this as a masterpiece. I don't see this as some sort of transcendental stuff, but as fun pop that a few of these tracks I'm going to come back to, work them in the rotation. I thought it hit that perfectly.
I was trying to, create this thesis about, what it means and how it relates to the band and to kind of the 2010s in general. And there's something there. I have a little bit of content.
I did my reading as well,
Yeah.
Wikipedia. And, they talked a lot about how they talked a little bit about how the Little Dark Age referred to the political era that we were in 2018 of the Trump administration. And their phrasing was like, this is the album about what do you do and how do you maintain hope when, evil is in control, which is an interesting thing to say, because do you know who has a songwriting credit on When You Die, which was one of my favorite tracks?
Oh, God.
Ario Pink.
Really? Ooh, evil. Ooh, evil.
I don't think he got the memo about what they thought the album was about, because I don't know if he would have wanted to be a part of it.
No, he didn't do his Wikipedia. I don't know if MGMT did their research on who Ariel Pink was.
Speaking of When You Died, which is, despite the questionable songwriting credits, I like that track.
As I was listening through, I was like, all right, what's Evan gonna like? And that was one of the ones I found. Well, I figured you would enjoy it in general, but what's gonna get mentioned? That was one of the ones.
Well, what did you think were gonna be the ones that I was gonna grab?
Definitely. I thought you'd like James. I thought you could get behind James.
James was not near my top. James was not, but James and.
I thought She Works Out Too Much would like that one.
That's probably my top. Some of these songs you can try to read into and find some deeper meanings, but I just enjoyed taking the album very literally, and so I like to imagine that the song, it didn't work out because he doesn't work out, and she works out too much. I like to take it completely literally, that their relationship really did just break up because of this one thing about not exercising enough, as opposed to that being a metaphor or a stand-in or whatever for the whole. It's like, if you think of it literally, it becomes a really funny, really quirky, charming song.
I think upon this kind of re-listen I did in my stringent and strict preparation.
Yeah.
I was gravitating a little bit more towards One Thing Left to Try. I like that song quite a bit these days. I've been listening to that a lot recently. And the closing track, Hand It Over, I have really been listening to a lot recently. I think it's kind of an interesting ballad end to the album, and it kind of takes, it's got the kind of synth-laden background vocals going on. It kind of takes a lot of the themes and kind of stylistic choices they were doing and washes it to the end.
Me and Michael, you where does that rank for you? I know.
Absolutely love it. The thing about Me and Michael and also James, those are two songs, similar-ish in content, maybe. Those two songs are songs for me that, like, if that song's in my head and I want to listen to it and it's like been playing, like sometimes I just wake up and I'll like have like a song kind of going in my head for whatever reason. If it's one of those two songs, I just have to listen to them. Like nothing else like quite hit like Me and Michael. It's great. It's so great.
They have Time Spent Looking at My Phone, or well,
I was gonna bring that up, but
which
continue.
is an okay song. But of course you see it. The song is not called Time Spent Looking at My Phone. They've called it T-Slamp.
T-Slamp.
And I think, that it's such a deliberate move, because nobody would want to listen to a song called Time Spent Looking at My Phone.
No, not at all.
I
barely want to listen to a song called T-Slamp, but I do it for that.
It sounds better. It does sound better because it is a little preachy.
It's definitely a little preachy.
It's not as but if it hadn't been called T-Slamp, and called Time Spent Looking at My Phone, you'd be like, oh my, I don't want to have somebody lectured like, oh, our phones, they're distancing us from each
know, yeah.
other. You know, we're
All right, yeah. So I have a couple points to make about T-Slamp. And the political aspect is one interesting one, because I know, at least personally, for in the Trumpian era, a lot of like the quote unquote what I wouldn't call activism, but I guess is kind of activism that I partook in, you know, signing petitions, you know,
sharing your article.
Yeah, sharing memes on Facebook. Like, it was all done through your phone, you know, at a certain part. So there's that aspect to it. But what got me about that phone, in the process of my stringent research, I was driving around my small town of Chester, Vermont, and I drove past this pack, this vicious, wild pack of like 6 or 7 like pre-teenagers. They were like 10 to 12 sort of thing, and they're all on the sidewalk in like a drizzle, like it was kind of raining outside, and they're all like on their bikes, like hanging out, like they went outside to ride bikes around with each other. And I'm like, that's phenomenal, because you assume that those guys are just getting on Xbox Live and like chatting through their headsets, right? Like that's what kids do. But like they weren't. They were like leaving
to go fight an evil clown.
Exactly. Yeah, they had the balloon. Yeah. It was
like, thank God we're getting back to our roots.
Yeah. No, exactly. So it kind of had me thinking, like, I always assume, like, I'm pretty addicted to my cell phone, I would say. Maybe not more than some people, but certainly more than some people. And I always just assumed that was the way things were going to be for the rest of time, is that like children would be addicted to technology, and that's exactly what it would be. Like, that's just how it was from now on. And like seeing these kids, I was like, oh, maybe it's just like our generation. Like maybe it's just, we grew up in this weird time where there was all this stuff that was new. We didn't know how like addicting it was necessarily, or didn't care really. And we're just going to be like this weird anomaly of this like, you know, generation addicted to like screens. Like, is that just us? And so it had me thinking about that song in a bit of a different light, because the preachiness aspect to it always like killed me, because I was always like, oh God, yeah, all right, I don't want to, like, the lyrical content of this song,
I like the sonic quality, but
fun to listen to, but I'd skip it more often than not, just because I was like, I don't know, I don't want to, you know, I want to get to me and Michael, like, I don't want
Michael.
Yeah. But see these kids, I was like, oh, maybe it's a little more pointed than that, you know, maybe it's you know, could be read as a song kind of, you know,
that things will return to that the little dark age will end, and
it will end. Yeah. Maybe it's hopeful, but it's still kind of preachy.
We didn't even talk about the title track,
Little Dark Age. It's kind of one of those songs where I'll listen to it and enjoy it, but sometimes I listen to it and I'm like, oh, this is fantastic. Like, this is really, really great. Something that struck me on the re-listen on the album is how much, you know, it's very time-centric. You know, you have time spent looking at my phone, you have the Little Dark Age, and then there's, you know, when you die, when you're small. You know, it's very kind of focused on like a time period and stuff like that. And, you know, coming at the end of the 2010s, you know, what was that decade? You think of like the aughts, and it's like 9/11, the Great Recession, like all that stuff. Like, what even happened in the 2010s? Like, I don't know. Trump came along and it was annoying for like the last quarter. It was much more than annoying. Honestly.
Yeah, it's just like, it's a fun, breezy, easy going with a few really strong tracks.
I agree.
There and in the no man's land, or the fog of doing this whole thing, it's nice to have an album that's like that. Thank you for coming on. I hope you enjoyed.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to be on the program, as it were.
And Michael,
solid as they come. It's great. It just makes you
Tuckerman. For the longest time, I was under, I feel like somebody had told me, and I was under the delusion that one of the members of this band was the guy who played Walt on Lost, the child actor on the show. who was in like the first few seasons and then appeared as a guest, you know, and somebody, I feel like somebody had said that to me at one point, and I just, you know, I was parroting that back, you know, just to people who would be talking about MGMT. I'd be like, well, you know, the guy who played Walt in Lost is in the band. And then I was thinking about it as we were talking about doing this, and I'm like, okay, now that I know a little bit more about time and how time works and years and what order they happen, I'm like, that mathematically doesn't make any sense. So what the fuck am I thinking about? And I looked it up. Malcolm David Kelly, who played Walt in Lost, is one half of the pop duo MKTO.